Well, thank you very much. Has anyone ever been third speaker after two dynamic women like that? If you think my inner voice was going, oh my God, you're absolutely right. But I think it actually brings in today this whole idea of confidence. And so what I'd like to do to start with is, we've all been sitting down for at least a couple of hours. So what I want you to do is I want you to stand up and I want you to find a space. Just a space anywhere, because what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to take one step. That's all you have to do, is take one step at this point in time. Okay? So I want you to imagine, I see a yawn here. We're going to take a deep breath. What I want you to do is imagine that there is an imaginary line in front of your feet. An imaginary line. All imagine that? Now what I want you to do is take a step forward over that imaginary line. Okay, now I want you to go back again. And I want you to take a deep breath in. I want to put your shoulders back and I want you to take a deep breath in and step over that imaginary line. Okay, now you're going to do it one more time. I want you to take a step back. I want you to take a deep breath in, shoulders back. I want you to take a step over that imaginary line and I want you to put your hand up. Okay, now, did I feel any passion with that hand up? Was there passion in that hand up? I don't think so. We're going to do it one more time. Okay, so remember, we're going to take a deep breath in, shoulders back. We're going to take a step forward over that imaginary line and we're going to put a hand up. Beautiful. Okay, fantastic. Now, it'll all become clear why I've done that, we hope. But the other thing though is, if nothing else, it's got some oxygen into your lungs. Okay, so one of the things that I think is really important is that when we're talking about confidence, you know, often in business we say, well, goody-o, how valuable is that? I truly believe that if we develop confidence in people, not just women but men as well, then this will be a strategic advantage for organisations. It'll be good for us, but it's also a strategic advantage for organisations. Now, why do I say that? Now, there's a couple of things. One is we talk about talent. Now, in organisations, can anyone tell me what we mean by talent? What's talent? Any ideas? Oh, don't worry, I'll pick on people if someone doesn't put their hand up. Ah, yes, what's talent?
Have something that's in short supply.
Yes, talent can be in short supply, so we're always looking for it. What else might talent be? Yeah?
It's everything that we all bring every single day.
Yeah, so it's a whole part of us. Yeah, and sometimes what often happens in organisations is that we often focus on one part of that talent, and that talent is often competence. So what we do is we spend all this time developing people's skill, their ability to do their job. You know, we send them on courses, how to do computer skills, how to do HR skills, whatever. But one of the things that we often fail to do is actually do the other side, which is develop people's confidence. And what do I mean by confidence? So talent, if talent predominantly is the combination of everything, but we often focus on talent being developing the skill, the competence to do the job. What do you think I mean, which is the other half of the equation, which is confidence? What do we mean by confidence? Any ideas? Oh, yes. Yeah, believing in that talent. And can I just say that there is one thing more than that. I can believe any time I want that I might have the talent, but unless I take that step forward and act, that talent will not be recognised. And if I listen to the speakers before, what were they doing? They took that step forward, even though they mightn't have necessarily felt the confidence, and made it happen. So you might have all the belief in yourself or not belief in yourself, but that's going to make no squat of difference unless you take your foot, put your step forward and put your hand up. Now, one of the things that I've learnt about this in my career, and I'm not going to tell you too many stories about myself, but I'm going to tell you two over the period of the next half an hour. And the first one was when I was much younger, quite a lot younger. And I was a nurse and a midwife and had delivered hundreds of babies, but I had an aspiration that I wanted to do something more with my life at that point in time. And so I went off and did the vocational guidance assessment and spent $1,000 at the time for them to tell me that I was going to be really good at marketing or I was going to be a detective. So I had to choose. I knew I loved CSI. So I had to choose whether I was going to be this detective or I was going to do a marketing degree. Anyway, I plucked the courage up and I started at La Trobe University and started in marketing. And unfortunately, after 8 weeks and doing quite well at my margarine assignment, I didn't like marketing. It wasn't about me. It wasn't about my true self. And so after 8 weeks, after going to all this work and effort, guess what? I find myself at home in Melbourne in front of the fire in my Chanel dressing gown, looking totally stunning, feeling like I'd been totally depressed for a whole week, going, oh my God, I've just failed with my life completely. I opened the newspaper. And unfortunately, in those days, the internet wasn't there. I'm talking a long time ago. And I've opened the newspaper and I'm sitting in front of the fire and I look at this piece of paper and this thing sticks out at me and says, TQM trainer. What the hell's TQM? Had no idea at the time. But I did know how to train because I actually had got qualifications in education at that point in time. And so I thought, wow, this could be an opportunity. This could be a way of getting me out of this career into another, but I had no idea how to do it. Anyway, I was living in Melbourne and the job was for Comet, a trucking company which is now part of Toll. And I had no idea about transport or anything like that, but I knew a man around the street who had a Comet truck. Never knew him from a bar of soap. I saw the ad in the paper in the morning and I thought, well, I better learn something about this fast before I ring up to see if they might want to take me for an interview. So I go around the street, knock on the door and say, hello, I'm your neighbour. My name's Brice and I believe you work for Comet. I've seen your truck. Do you do TQM in your organisation? Because, you know, I really probably need to know a little bit about it because I've seen this ad in the paper and he was really good. He didn't know a lot about it, but he gave me some information and said he'd bring me home some pamphlets the next day. I then thought, being a nurse, I didn't know anybody terribly well. I didn't know a lot. I wasn't networked or anything like that. But I thought of someone. So I rang them up and said, you know anything about TQM? What's that? They said, okay, that's all right. So the next day I went off to the university and we went to libraries in those days. We didn't just go off to the internet. And I looked up TQM and I thought, well, this is rather good because this is all about empowering people and really believing in people and how we can maximise people's confidence. So I rang up for the interview, rather for the guy on the end of the phone. I said, hello, my name's Brice and I saw this ad in the paper. And he said, do you know anything about TQM? Yes. Do you know anything about training? Yes. Anyway, I was fortunate enough to get the interview. And I tell you, by the time I got to that interview, I knew a hell of a lot more about TQM. But what was really interesting about this was that there I am at the interview. Now, nurses at this point didn't wear suits or anything, so I went and bought myself a new suit. It was navy blue, gorgeous it was. I had some high heel shoes on because you know what it's like with women. If you feel good about yourself, you're going to put yourself a bit further forward. So I went into the interview, and I can tell you right now, I was shaking. Now, I can't remember whether I was shaking from the cold because I'm sure that room was absolutely freezing, or I was shaking from sheer nerves. But that was okay because I'd practiced in the mirror all weekend. I had every question this guy was going to ask me, I had practiced. And I'd practiced my final line. So when the interview was over, I thought, oh, I've just got to get this line right. So we finished the interview and I say to him, you know, if you give me this opportunity, I won't disappoint you. And guess what? I got the job. I couldn't believe it. But what's really interesting about this story when I reflect on it, and I think this power of reflection is really important, was one is that did I have the competence to do the job? Competence. I had some competence. I knew about training. I certainly was learning pretty fast about what TQM was, but I wasn't full bottle on what that whole job was. The second thing, did I have confidence? Did I know what I was really doing? Did I have belief in myself? Well, sort of, yeah, maybe. But what I did was I put my foot forward. I put my hand up and I said, I'm going to give it a go. And what do you think the chatter in my voice, what do you think was going on in my head? Oh my God. They're going to think I'm an idiot. I'm going to go back to nursing. Oh, this is going to be a failure. But no, you've got to put that lovely chatter away, put your step forward and put your hand up. But the other thing that was really interesting, and has anyone read the book or even seen the information on the confidence code? If you haven't read this book, I swear it's one of the best books you will ever read, both men and women. It is absolutely fantastic. It's quite difficult to get in the bookshops, but I have given Sarana a executive summary. It's about 15 pages of this book, which if you haven't got time to read it, it really is worth reading. And some of the research in that book supports what I just said about that story. Is what is the difference often between men and women in a situation like this? How many women will say, oh, I can go for that job. I'll go and make that effort to do it, or they get off and can get sort of consumed by saying I mightn't be good enough or it won't be perfect. And one of the things I've learned is that the most powerful thing that we can give women is to say you can. And you mightn't be perfect at the first time, you mightn't have all the information, but you're going to give it a go. And one of the things about men is that they're more likely than women to not have all the confidence, but they will put their foot forward. And if we are going to be really successful and be the people that we can be and contribute in organisations, then this is something that I think we really need to be able to do. Put aside thinking you mightn't be perfect, listen to the voices in the head and put that foot forward. So, challenge number 1. So then let's have a look at men and women. What percentage of, and remember when I talk about confidence, it's about putting the foot forward. Forget the voices in the head, good, bad or indifferent. It's about acting. So if we looked at men and women in business, what percentage do you think of men feel confident in business? That means prepared to act. 100%. 100%. Okay. Any other ideas on 100%? 90. 70, 80, 90. Right. So, okay, let's just hold that for a second. Now, let me ask you, what do you think of women in business? What percentage do you think women in business, how confident might they be? 30. Oh, geez, there a difference. Anybody else say 30? Any other numbers? 50. Okay, but what did we notice? Whether the numbers are right or wrong, what did we just notice? Women are lower. Now, if we look at the research, and the research does come out of the Confidence Code, they say 50% of women in business lack the confidence to put that step forward, and 30% of men lack the confidence. So let's not assume that all men have confidence, because I've been an executive coach, I've been a head of HR for large companies in Australia, I've spoken to many men and women, and let me not tell you, not everyone is confident. And we assume so much that men have all the confidence. Let me tell you, if we look in the eyes of our partners or our bosses or whatever else, that's not necessarily the case. But what is the case is that in general terms, women haven't got as much confidence as men have in the workplace. And it's not that the men mightn't have voices that's going on in their heads as well, it's just that they put their foot forward and put their hand up. Now, let me ask you, going back to my suggestion that one of the things that in organisations is that if we can develop confidence in people in organisations, it's a strategic advantage. So, if we sit there and say that 50% of women lack confidence, which means 50% of women are confident, by the way, and 30% of men aren't confident to put their foot forward, that means 40% of people in organisation lack the confidence to put their hand up necessarily at a meeting, or to come up with, they've got a great idea in their head but they're not necessarily going to put it forward. Or gee whiz, they know that something's not right there and they really should say that's not right, or what people think of me, what if I'm wrong? And so can you imagine the talent that is that's been not tapped by 40% of our organisations not putting their hand up, when if they did, can you imagine the potential of talent that could be opened up? And when we're thinking about developing confidence, does it happen overnight? No. What is the key thing that helps us develop confidence in organisations? What do you think it is? Taking a risk. That's absolutely true. One key thing is taking a risk. And we'll talk more about that. What else? Support. Who said support? Support. Did I hear from the last two speakers how much importance it was for them having support? Okay, now let me ask you, who in organisations are the key people to support you to help develop not only your competence, the skill to do your job, but the confidence for you to step forward and put your hand up? Who is the key person in organisations? Sorry, so I've heard your boss? Yes. Now I might point out, of course, yourself. Putting yourself aside and you taking the action, who is the key person in the organisation to provide support? It is your manager. Now they can also help crush you. They're not necessarily there. Just because people are in a management job doesn't mean to say they're the best skilled at this. But maybe if we gave them some more support themselves, they may be better at it. But let me tell you another story, my second story in regards to this, in regards to confidence. When I was working at Comet, I was very passionate. Didn't necessarily know everything I was doing, but I was certainly passionate about what we were doing. And we were very fortunate that we actually won the best TQM, or what we call Quality Circle, in Australia, a team of truck drivers. It was just fantastic. And we went and we represented Australia in Singapore. Can you imagine going over on the plane with the guys just beaming? The whole transport companies, they've got all these conveyor belts. And when we won this wonderful award and these guys were being sent over to Singapore, the whole dock stopped and everyone put their hand up and said, "This is absolutely fabulous." And so I was really chuffed and, you know, delighted by this. So I started off with not knowing much, but I learnt fast, and it's amazing what you can do when you can unleash people's talent if they believe it's possible. But more importantly than that was that I, at the same time, was trying to develop my competence, and I was doing a degree in management. I was fortunate enough that my professor, he saw my paper on strategy, and I used the analogy of how we actually implemented TQM in Comet, and he asked me to present at this conference, and of which I agreed. And honestly, I can never forget it. I was living in Melbourne, but I was working in Sydney the day. I flew down, and I was sitting in the taxi. There were the gates, and I was that close. I was that close to telling the taxi to turn around. Because in my head, I was going, what would I know about speaking at a conference? I've never done that before. Just because I did this work at Comet doesn't mean anyone's going to be interested. And this was all that was going on. And what happened was I nearly got the taxi to turn around, but I didn't. Plucked myself up, stepped forward and went to speak at this conference. And forget what the conference was like. I spoke to this guy after it. He was also a fellow speaker. And his name was Ken. And we had a great conversation. And the next morning, he rang me up. He was the head of TQM for Orica, Australia. And there was 10,000 people. It's an engineering chemical company. And he rang me up the next morning and he said to me, Jenny, I was wondering if you might sort of come and see me. So I went off to see him. And after a couple of conversations, this is what he said to me. He said he was retiring in about 18 months. He was going north to have sea change. And that if I was able to influence 8 general managers to implement TQM in their business unit, engineers, then I would have a great chance of getting his job. However, if I didn't, and this job reported to the CEO of ICI Australia, Orica Australia, and he said to me, but if you don't, that means that you won't have a job. Anyway, I'll never forget, I'm walking out of there going, my God, what am I going to do? I mean, this is a great opportunity. Plus, it was double my salary in a company car. And I thought to myself, I can't do this. I mean, I'm going to throw away one job for another job which I mightn't be successful at and I could fail at. Anyway, what I did was I plucked myself up, put my step forward, and I took the job. And it was an amazing experience. It was one of those sliding doors that I didn't necessarily have the competence, I didn't have all the confidence, but I'd made an effort and I was successful and I did get that job after the 18 months. But what's interesting about this was my boss, Ken. He absolutely believed in me. where I didn't necessarily believe in myself, but he believed in me. And let me tell you, he gave me some of the most awful feedback you can ever imagine. If you want to talk about feeling like your confidence is crushed and put on the floor and screwed into the ground, let me tell you, that felt like me. Can I just tell you a couple of things he said to me? So here he was. I came from the western suburbs of Melbourne. And please do not be offended by this. This is not in any way being intentional. I'm just telling you what he said to me. So the first thing he said to me was, I used to wear these big earrings. I don't know if anyone remembers them, the barley earrings, you know. Here I am in the corporate you know, Melbourne with my another new suit on, but was wearing these barley style earrings. And he brought me into his office and he said, listen, Jenny, if you continue to wear those earrings, you are not going to be taken seriously in this organisation. And, you know, I think you need to do something about that. Well, you can imagine, can't you? Well, I went, I'm going to wear my earrings. I don't care what he says. And then I went home in the car and went, oh, he's probably, you know, his intent was, how does he help me? It mightn't have been the most politically correct thing he could possibly said, but he was trying to help me. And if I thought that was bad, one day he calls me into my office and he says, Jenny, come in. He said, now I don't want you to be like a Westie. He said, you know, when you get very excited, what happens is you get your words confused. And if you're going to be reporting to the CEO of, you know, Orica, then you really have to make sure you get your words right. So I think you should go and get your act together. Well, I crawled out of the office. I remember going home in my car, my lovely little Honda Prelude at the time, and I was thumping the steering wheel. I was so upset. I was tears crying out of my... I was just really upset. I thought, how could he say this to me? But guess what? I realised that what was his intent? His intent was trying to help me. It mightn't have been pitch perfect or whatever else. So I plucked myself up and said, I've got to practice this because that's something I do and that's going to hinder my career. But what's really interesting about this story, if you go back to the research, what do you think if people who are your direct manager are the people who can either you know, can absolutely develop and support you in your career and help you develop your confidence, what do you think is the major reason why they don't give women feedback in organisation, particularly about confidence? Who said that? Absolutely. Now, why are they afraid to? Reaction. We all know about that, don't we? Right, and what type of reaction might we give? We might be hysterical or tears. What else might we do? Complain, yes. We might, and you know, with all the laws and legalities and everything else, so what's really interesting, all the research says it's not that some people might want to give you the feedback, they're reticent to give the feedback because of the consequences of giving that feedback. Now, I think that's a tragedy. If I had have, you know, got all upset, got in tears, I was in tears, but you know what I mean. If I really took that on board and I didn't say, what can I learn from this, even though it wasn't picture perfect, then I might not have become, you know, gone on to have a very successful career as the Director of HR. So one of the things I think we as women need to do is sometimes we have to suck it up. You know, and say sometimes we've got to look at people in power and say, what is their intent? I think that's one of the most powerful words we can ever ask. What is this person's intent? And more often than not, people are wanting you to be successful. They mightn't know how to do it very well, but they often do. And on my website, I have this fabulous quote, which I really like. It says that people need something to believe in, someone to believe in, and someone to believe in them. And if we can create that type of culture and environment in an organisation, can you imagine how much confidence people might be able to aspire to? Remember that 40%? 40%. That's untapped talent. That's untapped people saying, what can I do? And feel the freedom to do it. And what I think we need to do in organisations is not only help people develop the competence, which we're quite good at, but it's how do we develop the confidence as well? And how do we give people the skill to help people develop their own confidence, and managers ability to help people develop their confidence. And when I was recently working for a bank, helping them with their diversity strategy, one of the things that came out from that was exactly that, that we had to design and develop some information for managers as well as women to help them develop their confidence. Now, I'm not going to go too much into all the design of that, but just to give you an example, has anyone heard of Amy Cuddy? If you haven't heard of Amy Cuddy, I've told you one book, The Confidence Code's great, haven't got enough time, read the executive summary. Amy Cuddy has a video on YouTube on one of Ted's talks. It is a must. Only takes about 24 minutes, but basically it's done all this research on what encourages people to be more confident. And one of the things that they talk about, and I'm not going to go into too much detail today because we obviously are running out of time, but the whole idea that when people stand, remember I start off, breathe in, stand tall, step forward, put your hand up. When you actually physically change your body into a very positive stance, what often happens is that your cortisol levels drop and your testosterone goes up. And if you can sustain that for 2 minutes, what will often do, that will give you your boost of confidence when you're going for that interview or going in to see your manager to talk about something that may be uncomfortable or whatever else. Now, that's only one tiny little technique. There are many others that we can do that can help boost our confidence. And you know what else happens? This is the other thing that I think is absolutely fantastic. Is, you know, when I said you took one step forward, guess what? When you gain more confidence, you put another step forward and another step forward. And after a while you go, gee, I can do that. And you don't have to think about it necessarily because you look at yourself in the mirror and you say, you know, I am confident. And I mightn't be confident all the time, but I have that strength and it's a reinforcing loop. However, are people confident all the time? Nice to know. You're not confident all the time? No? No? Sometimes we assume that people who are the heads of organisations, the heads of departments, they're confident all the time. Let me assure you, they're not. We all are human, we all have our concerns, we all have our worries. I'm coaching someone at the moment who is an amazing person, has a very senior executive and is choosing at this point not to take another major step in the organisation because he doesn't think he's got the confidence to do it. You would look at this person, you would think that is unbelievable, that this person is obviously co-competent. But one of the things that we don't understand is we often think that because people are at the top of the tree or further up, that they are more confident or more capable, whatever. And let me assure you, we are all human and we all have our foibles and we all need support and we all need confidence to help ourselves get through that at some times. So don't necessarily think just because someone's up there that they may have all the confidence. And to finish off on two things, I remember, would anyone think I was over 50? Oh, you're polite. Do you know that I was the head of HR for a bank, and my husband or partner went to Tasmania, and I went down there, gave up my job and went down there with him. And we were going to be coming back to the mainland. And I knew that when I'd come back, so even though I was working in Tasmania, not in any capacity of like what I was working in on the eastern states, I came back to the mainland to get another job. I had just turned 50. And I remember going to the headhunters. Now, anybody in HR knows the top headhunters. There's the top 4 and then there's the top 6. So I went and saw one of the top 4 headhunters in Melbourne, sitting in his office, and said, well, you know, I'd like to get another head of HR job. And he looked at me and he said, Ginny, he said, you're 50. He said, totally politically incorrect, but he was telling me what he saw the truth was. He said, you're turned 50 now, And look, no organisation is going to give you a chance at this point in time because they're looking for younger people who will have career opportunities. And let's get serious. This will probably be your last hurrah. I am not joking. I walked out of there going, bastard. I'm going to prove him wrong, but I did have grey hair at the time and I quickly changed it. But I then went to Sydney to one of the other top 6 headhunters in Sydney, and I knew this guy personally. We'd actually become friends. I went to see him, and he basically agreed with this other guy but said, you don't have to worry because you don't have to work. Now, you think that this doesn't happen? It does. And let me tell you, here I was for 20 years thinking I was pretty good, and if I wasn't feeling pretty good to start with, I was feeling pretty good by the end of it. And then I suddenly was perceived as old. And let me tell you, it was an amazing experience for me. Where do you think my confidence level went? I went for a whole pile of jobs. I only got offered the things that no one else wanted. And I was gobsmacked. I could not believe that my brains disappeared when I turned 50. I couldn't believe that I didn't have opportunity and that I wasn't going to work till I was 70. But what was really interesting about that, my confidence for someone who was really confident was down on the floor, a lot of big fat lard seeping everywhere. And what I did though was 2 major things. I picked myself up. I needed some support and some help. I spoke to some key people I'd worked with, and we came up with another strategy, which is my executive coaching practice, my conference centre, and I also do a lot of facilitation. But do you know what? Everyone goes through that stage, and that's okay for whatever reason. But you've got to put it aside and step forward and put your hand up. The last thing I want to do is read you a poem. Yes, a poem. 26 years ago, when I was working at Orica, you know, with the boss with the earrings, I was doing a coaching. I had a young woman who was 22, and I wish I knew where she was or her name, because she gave me one of the most wonderful gifts. She followed me around for a whole month, like meetings, flying to Sydney. She was my shadow. It was a fantastic program, and I hope it's repeated. She worked in a business school and followed me around for a month. And when she left, she gave me this present, which was a poem. Just bear with me for a second. And I have got some copies of this for anyone who might like it, but it was a great gift to me, and I have certainly given this to a couple of people in my life who are very special. But I thought it was time to share this because I think it is I think it summarises all the things that I've spoken to about today and gets to the core of it. Unfortunately, now I'm over 50, I have to remember where my glasses are. So, it's called A Time to Risk. And she gave this to me. It's been on my wall for 26 years. I had it done in calligraphy. To laugh is to risk appearing the fool. To weep is to risk appearing sentimental. To reach out for another is to risk involvement. To expose feelings is to risk exposing your true self. To place your ideas, your dreams before the crowd is to risk loss. To love is to risk not being loved in return. To live is to risk dying. To hope is to risk despair. To try it all is to risk failure. But risk we must, because the greatest hazard to the life is to risk nothing. The woman who risks nothing, does nothing, has nothing, is nothing. She may avoid suffering, but she simply cannot learn, feel, change, grow, love, live. Chained by her certitude, she is a slave. She has forfeited freedom. Only the person who risks can be called a free person. So take that step, take the risk.